Hey Ghouliacs, I'm out here in Laredo College, formerly known as Fort McIntosh. It's one of the most oldest locations in Laredo. It has a lot of history, and rumors say there's a lot of paranormal activity here. I brought back a special guest, Chris James, to explain a few things about Fort McIntosh, alongside what has he been up to with his podcast, his future events. Anyways, so that being said, hey Chris James.
Howdy. Glad you have me on your show again.
Yes, sir. So Chris James, I have this question. Now that we're here right now at Fort McIntosh, where do you believe is the most haunted location here?
The streets.
The streets?
There have been lots of sightings of various things just driving around the campus area. And it's one of these things where if you keep your eyes open long enough, you're going to see something. A good friend of my wife's, Paulina, was attending college here, becoming a school teacher. And she was walking down, I believe it's this street right here in front of us. And as she's walking towards the building where she's going to have class, she sees a woman walking across the street right in front of her. And she just didn't think anything odd of it. You know, it's a college. But it was early in the morning and there was nobody else around. As she watches this person moving across the street, long black hair, long, like down past her waist, a white dress that went all the way and it didn't touch the ground. She was about a foot off the ground,
floating,
drifting across the street in front of her. And Paulina stood there and stared at this woman for a few seconds and realized this was a spirit of some kind, a ghost. And so she turned around, ran back, I believe it was to the Kazan Center, got on the phone, called her boyfriend, who would later become her husband, and said, "I just saw a ghost. What do I do?" And he was like, "Well, stay where you are." It didn't bother her. They just drifted by. And a lot of people get scared when they see things they don't understand.
Of course.
One person seeing something odd like that would be an anomaly. Maybe they saw something, they thought it was a ghost. Mm-hmm. However, a group of college students were here at the ball field practicing. And they were finishing up for the evening, and they're putting all their gear in the trunks of their cars. And one of them looked up and said, "What is that?" And they all turned and looked, and here was this white dress lady, long black hair, drifting across the end of the street, the exact same place Paulina had seen it. They all looked at that, and it's like, holy cow, well, let's get out of here. And they all jumped in their cars and drove off. Also, there is what's known as the little girl, who is seen all over the place out here. She's described as being about 8 or 9 years old, shoulder-length brown hair. She's also wearing a white dress that comes down to her knees, and she has these weird-looking boots with buttons on them. They stopped making boots with buttons back in 1917. They discovered a zipper was a better way to do it. She's seen walking all over the campus. First report that I got was from one of the campus police officers. He saw her walking down the street in front of the chapel, which became the Children's Museum. Back when you could drive back and forth, the street is now just a walkway.
Okay.
He saw her walking along, and he thought, what is a 8-9-year-old girl doing walking around the college at 2 o'clock in the morning? So he stopped to ask her, and she just disappeared. Not thinking anything paranormal could possibly happen, he jumped out of his unit and walked around trying to see where she could have hidden. But the area where he spotted her was between the chapel and the print office, and there wasn't any building there at the time. And he just convinced himself he was working too hard, and he went on about his duties. Another police officer, also here on the campus, was driving along, and he saw the same girl walking into the motor pool that used to be a stables for the cavalry. And he knew that 8-year-old girl, not supposed to be walking around the campus in the middle of the night, so he went to see what she was doing. And she walked into the motor pool. He followed her, trying to figure out who she was and what she was doing. Couldn't find her in the motor pool. And there's no place to hide, and there's about an 8-foot fence all the way around the thing. That's when he looked at the ground to try and see if he could find her footprints, and there were none, just his.
Just his.
So being a good police officer, he jumped in his unit and got the heck out of there, not wanting to say anything to anyone. Third police officer, also here on the campus, was driving past the old hospital. Same thing, little girl, long brown hair, white dress, walking along the sidewalk like she owned the place, and she disappeared. Couldn't have gone into the old hospital because the door was locked and there's no place else to go. Now this was back when the police station was right next door to the hospital. The fourth police officer was Laredo PD, and he was driving from the neighborhood south of here back into town, and he was going to go over the bridge because the trains had the crossings all blocked.
Yes.
He's driving past where the old theater used to be. It was the campus library for a while. He's driving along, and he said suddenly a little girl leaped from the top of one of these trash cans with the cover on it, landed on the hood of his car.
Wow.
He was torn between being terrified that he'd hit her and mad that she'd put a dent in his hood. He leaps out of the car, runs to the front of the car, and she's gone. Completely disappeared. He even got down on his knees and looked under the vehicle, terrified that he was going to see her under there, but
Nothing
disappeared. So then he looked at his unit and he realized there's no dent. Now he heard the thud as she hit the hood. No markings of anybody having attacked his unit. I would, having been in the Border Patrol for 26 and a half years, they know that if they tell me their stories, I'll keep their names out of it, which is a very, very important thing to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, the streets of the campus seem to have a lot of activity. If you go into some of the buildings, yes, there's activity like the Arechiga Hall, the Kazan Center, but most of the stories that I've gotten from people were out here on the streets. And makes for an interesting place to visit late at night, which I used to do a lot of.
Chris James, what is your next event that you'll be
Next Saturday, not this upcoming Saturday, but August 17th. I always have to check with my wife because I get August and September mixed up for some odd reason. August 17th, I will be in Jefferson, Texas at the UFO convention.
Wow.
And Daryl Sims, who used to be on TV on a show called The Alien Hunter, he's going to be the top speaker, and they're going to squeeze me up on stage sometime, probably early in the morning when most of the folks haven't arrived yet. I'll be the opening. Well, hopefully, I want to be the opening, because if you aren't super wow spectacular, most people will forget it by the end of the day. However, if you have to follow somebody like Daryl or Daniel, then everybody's like, he's not as good as the other people. So, but yeah, that's August 17th in Jefferson, Texas, which is
next week.
About 560 miles up 59.
Okay.
Yeah, next Saturday. Unfortunately, if you do drive up there, you've got a choice of driving through Austin or driving through Houston. And neither of which is a fun trip, but I'll probably go through Austin. It's the same length, but yeah, it's the next event. My podcast, I do it every week. I've missed one show since 2016 when I started. And what had happened was I interviewed Ken Gerhardt. He's a cryptozoologist who's been all over the world. He lives up in Fort Worth or Dallas. I think he lives in Dallas. No, he lives in San Antonio. I've got him mixed up with Lyle Blackburn. Ken Gerhardt was working evenings, and so he arranged to be recorded because I used to do the show live. And I called him, I believe it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night. We did the hour-long show. He was a fantastic guest. Saturday, I went to play the show back on the station, and there was nothing there. It had failed to record. Some button hadn't gotten pushed.
Yeah.
But since 2016, I've only missed the one show, which, I don't know. There's a lot of podcasts, thousands of podcasts out there, and yet some of them will do maybe a dozen shows, and then they just kind of run out of steam. It's sad because you start listening to somebody and, I like the way this guy presents his subject. I like the way he talks. And all of a sudden they go away.
Yeah, they just go away. I know a few people that have done that for sure. Anyone could go ahead and make the trip up there for in Jefferson, Texas for the UFO convention.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Go ahead and make it up there so you can, have a conversation with Chris James and learn all about Strange Things, his podcast that I listen to once every other week.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most recent podcasts that I heard of you was about the eyes. I thought it was really, really interesting.
It's amazing how much information you can get from a person just looking in their eyeballs.
Yes.
Which also brings to mind why so many people won't look at you. And you wonder what is passing from your eyes to their eyes that is uncomfortable. In some parts of the world, if you stare somebody in the eyes, you're going to start a fight.
Yeah.
Other parts of the country, you stare somebody in the eyes, liable to start a romantic interlude. Some countries, when you're speaking to somebody, they expect you to stare them in the eyes.
Yes.
Now, I tend to look around because I'm looking for Bigfoot, flying saucer, maybe a small bundle of money that somebody dropped on the ground.
Of course.
If you don't look around, it's amazing what people miss.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. I'm glad I got a chance to catch up with you, Chris James, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
You bet.
All right.
Appreciate it.